Dozens of protests erupted on university campuses and in cities across China on Saturday in an unprecedented show of defiance and anger against the government's restrictive zero-COVID policy. Many shouted for leader Xi Jinping and the Communist Party to step down. A deadly fire at an apartment building in the far western region of Xinjiang appears to be fueling the most recent anger as video emerged, which appeared to show lockdown measures delayed firefighters from reaching the victims. Now, in an op-ed published Sunday morning, Chinese state media calls the current COVID measures, quote, scientifically effective, saying the public should have full confidence in them. All right, let's get the latest from CNN's Beijing bureau chief, Stephen Zhang. Stephen, we've seen isolated protests before, but do these seem different in terms of the size and the scale?
That's right. This wave of protests really triggered by that deadly Xinjiang fire you just mentioned, but also how the authorities there handled the aftermath, because on one hand, they rejected claims that their COVID measures had anything to do with the firefighters' inability to reach the fire quickly. But on the other hand, after insisting for weeks and months that COVID situation in Xinjiang was so severe, lockdowns must be maintained, all of a sudden, they announced this miraculous victory in their campaign and also a phased reopening. So I think all of that really serving as the latest and loudest wake-up call to a lot of people in terms of how increasingly ineffective, unscientific, and not to mention potentially dangerous this zero-COVID policy has become. And also, of course, all the absurdities surrounding its enforcement. That's why we have seen people across this country really trying to take the matter into their own hands. Not only you see people in Xinjiang taking to the streets, demanding their freedom, clashing with security forces, but also even here in Beijing, for example, residents are seeing tearing down metal barriers or fences set up by local officials to seal them off in their residences. But all of that really culminating Saturday night into Sunday morning with multiple vigils and protests, often spearheaded by young people on university campuses. You know, they are seen holding up white paper, white obviously being the color of mourning, not only for the victims of Xinjiang, but also trying to, they seem to trying to indicate there is so much anger and frustration pent up inside themselves, but they were not allowed to express them. Because remember, for a lot of these university students, their entire college life has been under some form of a lockdown, Kim.
Just looking at the video, you see how big the protests are. You see the police presence there. You talked about clashes with authorities. Is there a chance that the crackdown on the protests might turn more violent, maybe even deadly?
That is a potential worry because when you look at these protests, I think they are widespread, as you mentioned. But that one extraordinary protest, you played some of the sound in the introduction, was the one taking place in downtown Shanghai on Saturday night, because the protesters there really chanting slogans directly targeting the ruling Communist Party and its strawman leader Xi Jinping. That was just such a watershed moment in the minds of many people, because so far even opponents of the policy had been dancing around this quite a bit in terms of saying the policy may not be all wrong and the leadership really their heart was in the right place, but blaming local enforcement and pointing finger at overzealous or incompetent local officials. But those protesters in Shanghai really directly challenging the legitimacy of the Communist Party and its leader. That, as you know, is something simply not tolerated here. So that's why there's a lot of concern and worry about the protesters. Some of them have been taken away by police. We understand that's why a crowd has again gathered up in Shanghai on the same location demanding their release. So I think there is a lot of concern there, but not to mention, of course, from the government's perspective, there is also a lot of fear that this kind of chanting and protest could inspire others across this country. Kim?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll keep an eye on this important story throughout the morning. Stephen Zhang, thanks so much.